Hey, hello friends. Today we're going to be making an API using Spring Boot, and then we're going to integrate that with a database. I'm going to try to do this as quickly as possible, so there's a lot of stuff I'm not going to go over, like I have Docker running right now, and then I've already wired up a connection to a database, but this database is currently empty. Yeah, we have no tables in there. So again, I'm going to try to do this as quickly as possible. So we already have our Spring Boot application up and running. These are some properties that, again, I'm not going to go over that do need to be wired up. But let's go ahead and get started here. Let's make our packages. We are going to need a repository. We are going to need a model. We are going to need a service. We are going to need a controller. Sorry. Boom. Is that everything? Yeah. So let's go ahead and start with the fun part. Let's make our Space Marine. And our first annotation is going to be at entity. So this is just going to tell our database that this, or rather our repository, that this is something that we want to map to the database. It is going to create a new table called Space Marine, and it is going to have columns with these properties. So private, again, we're going to keep it very simple today. Our ID is just going to be an int. Our Space Marine needs a name. Our Space Marine needs a faction. And our Space Marine, most importantly, we need to know, is he loyal or is he disloyal? Is he a good guy or is he a bad guy? Boom. So that should be good there. Now this is usually where I would either by hand type out all my getters and setters. I don't know why I do that when you can just auto-generate them. This is usually where I'd auto-generate them, which I do actually like to do. I like to have these here. But there's this annotation at data, which I've actually heard recently a lot of people don't like. But again, for simplicity's sake, we'll just use that. And maybe to let you know, this is going to handle all of our getters and setters for us, which is cool. And there's also these all-args constructor, which is going to add a constructor with every argument, and a no-args constructor, which is going to add a constructor for when no arguments are passed to it. One more thing before we go, we want to add this annotation at ID, which is just going to tell us, hey, this value right here represents the unique ID for our database. And we are going to have it auto-generate that for us. So instead of us having to tell it every time, oh, this one's number 1, this one's number 2, this one's number 3, whoops. It's just going to do it for us. So generation value dot generation type dot, yeah, there we go. And you can see here we have different strategies. UUID is something I've been messing with lately, but we're just going to keep it simple. Identity, this is just going to add 1 each time. Go ahead and import that for each new entry into the database, right? So the first one's going to be 1, then 2, then 3, etc., etc. Cool. So this should be our model. Good to go. Then our model is going to get handled by our repository, like I was saying, which is going to be an interface, Space Marine repo. And it is going to extend the JPA repository, which gives us all kinds of cool functionality, mainly that it handles all the CRUD for us out of the box. We don't have to type up all that boilerplate, create, read, update, destroy, delete. Well, I guess Space Marines destroy, makes sense. We don't have to code all that. It's going to take care of that for us, which is just tremendous. There's some really cool stuff you can do with what I've been calling method stubs, but I think that's the wrong name for it, where you can make your own custom queries very easily and do some really cool stuff with those, especially when you start making relationships between different stuff. There's a lot of power there. But we're going to keep it simple, so that's our repo. Then let's go backwards in our architecture here. Let's create from our repository to our service. I'm going to create a class, Space Marine service, and this just needs the annotation at service, and we are going to auto wire our repository. So auto wire is just going to take care of all the dependency injection for us. Space Marine repo, Space Marine repo. The simplest of terms for me as a developer, it just means that I don't have to worry about this. I don't have to put this in a constructor. I don't have to worry about these configurations. It's just going to do it for me. So again, we're going to keep this nice and simple. we're just going to create a service method that returns a straight up Space Marine. We're going to call it create Space Marine, and it is going to get a straight up Space Marine from our controller. Now maybe we want to use DTOs, but this object that we're creating is really straightforward. So again, I'm just trying to keep it simple. And like I said, what's really cool is we already have all of these stuff built into our repository right out of the box. So save. We can just save our Space Marine. Yep, what am I doing? Boom, done. So that is the functionality we need to now store this Space Marine in the database right there. It's that simple, which is very, very cool. So now let's go ahead and go to our controller. And we're going to call it a Space Marine controller. And this just needs a few annotations. Rest controller, so that it knows it's a controller. And at request mapping, we could put in a path in here if we wanted, Space Marine, something like that. But this is a very simple. We're just going to leave it as by default. This is the home path. And we're going to do a post mapping for creating our Space Marine. Do I even need to put that in there? I don't think so, but we're going to put it in. And then we are going to have a method. Again, we're going to return a straight up Space Marine. And we're going to get that information from the request body of the HTTP request. So there are these Java util classes you can use called request entity and response entity that gives you much more functionality into the HTTP request. You get access to the headers and the body, and there's just a lot more stuff you can do. But again, we are keeping this very simple. So I forgot to bring in my service, which again we're going to autowire our Space Marine service. I'm very verbose, I know, I'm sorry. Space Marine service. Go ahead and import all that, blammo. And we're just going to go ahead and return our Space Marine service. Whoops. Dot create. Yep, there it is. Filled it out for us. Perfect. Boom. And there we go. That should be everything we need to go ahead and get this to work. So, let us go ahead and test this. If we look in our database, like I said, I have this spun up already, but there's nothing in this tables box. When we go ahead and run this application, it should create a table in there. Unless I mess something up. It looks like it worked just fine. Let's go ahead and refresh this. Boom! And there we go. We have our Space Marine table, just like that. That easy. That is why Spring Boot is so great. And do some super complicated SQL here to go ahead and show you that this is our empty table. Now we already have this route created just to spare you guys some time. So let's go ahead and test this. Where now we are going to send a request to this API and to see it in action. So we're going to create a Space Marine called Adrian, that's me. And he is going to be in the faction Buckeyes, and he is going to be loyal. He is a good guy. So we're going to go ahead and send this off to this route. This is just our local host. I am running on 8,000. Yeah. So this should give us a 200 response. Let's go ahead and find out. Go ahead and send that. Boom, there we go. You see we got our auto-generated ID 1, of our name, and then he's loyal, and then we can go ahead and confirm this in our database. Hey, there he is. That's him. And then we can create somebody else. We can say Jimmy. He is in the faction Wolverines, and he is not a loyalist. He is a traitor. Go ahead and send this off. Boom, he's got the ID 2, Jimmy, and he is not loyal. Go ahead and check this again. And boom. So that is it as quickly as I can whip this together, just an API using Spring Boot, and then, I mean, we didn't really integrate, I didn't show you integrating it with a database. Maybe I'll do that later. But thank you very much for your time. Like, comment, subscribe. If you're here for one of my job interviews, maybe hire me. We can talk about it. We'll just keep talking about it. Thank you very, very much, you guys. Have a good one, all right?